Right, lovely. Okay, so as I say, it's a really informal session today, and we're just going to be led by Roland and Maria and Laura, who many of you will have seen at the, or actually, I realise now that's a totally different event, but many of you, we were talking about the work they are doing on identifying OERs in reading lists using Talis and Leganto. So before I hand over to them, I just want to share with you what we'll be using the information for. So first of all, I'm just going to share my screen very quickly and talk you through what we'll be doing. Let's have a look. Right, okay. So those of you who were at the SCON event, you'll remember that Barb Thies from the Open Education Network was talking about our website, the OER Community of Practice for UK and Ireland, and the work that we have already done with Sheffield, Coventry, Leeds, York, and Brunel University. So about 18 months ago, a lot of groups of librarians from all those different institutions, we just went through all of the open access book repositories looking for textbooks that we would feel comfortable putting in front of an academic. And we've shared those on the OER Community Practice website already. You can see they're in a really rough and ready form, but they're just out there and free for people to use and go through. But what we wanted to do next was, I think this is where Roland in my team, who's our systems librarian, he identified that actually we can pull out the OERs that we already have in Brunel's reading lists. And I was surprised by the number that we already have. So I think when we whittled it down, it was about 30 textbooks that are currently being used in modules across Brunel already. And I'm going to use a broad definition of a textbook as something, I'm going to share the definition that the Open Education Network tend to use. So they think of a textbook as something where you could realistically expect that to support a module over a period of about 10 weeks. So there may well be OERs in your reading lists, which are individual chapters that would just be for 1 or maybe 2 weeks. But for inclusion in the Open Textbook Library, you would expect it to be a bit larger than that. So when Barb last week was showing open textbooks for reading lists, she also mentioned that if you click on share your suggestions on this, that will take you through just to a basic spreadsheet. And this is the information that we will need. So simply the title of the text, a link to the original source, ideally the publisher and the license, the subject and the institution whose reading list it is on. That is all the information that we will need. And then we have an arrangement now with the Open Textbook, with the Open Education Network, that they will then populate the Open Textbook Library and a UK and Ireland version of that. So once we have sufficient reading list material from everybody who's attended here, we'll start sending that raw material to them, and they will create these records and the associated MARC records that go with them. And for me, this is really important because one of the things that I think is most powerful about the way that the Open Education Network uses its information, they set a very low bar for academics to engage with open textbooks. They say, here's a workshop, the culminating event will be demonstrating the Open Textbook Library, and they will then ask academics to submit the reviews that you can see down there on the left-hand side. So then future academics, when they're looking for peer-reviewed catalogue records of these books, they have them here in the Open Textbook Library. And those peer reviews are really powerful in helping them understand whether, or feel comfortable, whether that's something they can include in their own reading list modules. So to have a UK and Ireland version of this will make it a lot easier for people across institutions around the country to be able to do those workshops too. And in the US, they have found that about 50% of academics who attend a workshop and review a book in the Open Textbook Library, they go on to include a textbook in their own reading lists. So it's a really powerful way to get started on using OERs in your own institution. So all of this, they will create with their staff. All we need to do is fill in this really basic information that you'll find on the OER Community of Practice reading list page just here under Share Your Suggestions. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, so that's what we're asking everybody to do. I should also mention that we're just asking for you to share that raw information. Alongside that, I've got a workshop planned with a colleague from Coventry University, Dalbadesha, who I think is on this call as well. And she and I are going to be leading a group of library colleagues, again from around the country, who have volunteered their time to review the content that everybody here submits before we send that on to the Open Education Network. So just to see whether it meets the standards that they need for the Open Textbook Library. So that first workshop that I'll be leading with Dal is on the 26th of February. And so let some of your colleagues know if they also want to join in that group and volunteer to use it for their time to be used that way. But if you are planning to pull out that information from your reading lists, the earlier the better, so we can see just how many colleagues we need to plan for to get all this work into the Open Textbook Library. So that'd be really good if you can. I know you're volunteering your time, and I'm really pleased that everyone's here. But if you can do that quickly, that will really help that next group of librarians to do their piece of the work. Right, so that was my introduction. So what we'll do now, I'm going to hand over to Roland. He is a systems librarian here at Brunel. He's going to talk you through how he pulled out those OERs from Talis. So Roland, over to you.
Right, hopefully I'm sharing my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hi everyone. This is a longer version of the instructions that were sent out on the disk mail list last week. I'm just going to walk through the process that I used to extract open textbooks data from Talis Aspire, what we did and the trouble we got into along the way. So these instructions assume that you have admin access to Talis. If you have that access, then you should have access to the all list items report, which looks similar to what's on the screen here. As you can see, we've got nearly 1 million list items on our system. So immediately you obviously want to do some filtering. If you keep an eye on that total at the top, you'll see as I go through and add filters, you'll see that total kind of falling down. So the first filter I looked at was resource type. I chose book and chapter here because every other resource type essentially wasn't a book. So I wanted to just get it down to the books straight off the bat. And then the second filter that I chose was I selected online resource source with DOIs and URLs selected. Because I figured that anything that's not set is likely to be a physical book or physical item. And then to explain this filter a little bit, I have to talk about our Talis rollover. So when we do our Talis rollover, the previous year gets locked in, so it becomes like a snapshot in time. And the reading list for the current year is still in a state of flux at the moment. So the 2025-26 one is still changing, it's still ongoing. So when I ran this for the time period, I selected 2024-25, and I would imagine that as we go forward, we'll probably run it again each year in May after our rollover to kind of see if anything additional has been added. And for us, I realise it's the totals dropped off the top, but for us, after doing this step, we had a filtered list of 19,716 items. So far, so good. But that's where I started to come across a few problems and find things a little bit tricky. So I got my data out of Talis, almost 20,000 lines. And this is a snapshot of the output produced. And I realized that I could probably write some kind of Excel formula that would compare the various fields containing URLs to a predefined list of known OER sources. Turned out to be a bad idea, and I'll explain why in a second. And I'm calling this the fried egg approach, and you'll find out why. So I wrote my formula, and I used it to query the URL fields that you can see query the URL fields against those strings that you can see on the screen there, and those are held in a separate sheet. And it worked. For row number 1, it worked. And then I dragged the formula down, and it turns out that doing about 60,000 comparisons in an Excel spreadsheet using a complicated formula, not a very good idea, because my laptop got very hot, and that's why it's called the fried egg approach. Yeah, it's not an approach I would use because there's lots of better ways to cook an egg, quite frankly. But it did mean that I had the data in front of me, so I went back and looked at it again without adding any formula this time. And so, yeah, on the plus side, I had 20,000 records in an Excel spreadsheet, so I could inspect that data. And it meant that I was able to spot that there were commonalities in library notes and student notes and things like that, where helpful members of staff, helpful academics had added things over the years to mention where items might be open access. So you can see from our data that we've got a very prevalent common phrase of open access here. And you may find that you've got similar already, or you may decide that you want to change your processes so that you can add these library notes as you go over time, as you're reviewing reading lists. Maybe if you identify something that's open access, you can add the notes in. So for us, this meant that I was able to go back to the Talis report and use 2 different approaches to get OER data out. The first approach is using that metadata that we've just looked at. That can only be replicated if you've got that data present. But the second approach can be followed by anyone, and that involves filtering by URLs. I'll show you that in a moment as well. So first of all, the metadata approach. This is the filter I used for the library note, and you can see at the top 171 items were selected there. So for a library note containing the exact phrase open access. And then this is the URL filter approach, an example here. So we had 45 items that were selected containing the exact string Gutenberg. As an aside, I don't know why this filter is named URL prefix, because it actually seems to search for that string regardless of where it is in the URL. And another aside, unfortunately, Talis reports do not allow for searching for multiple strings in one go at the same time. So it's necessary, if you've got a list of different prefixes or a list of different URL strings you want to look for, it's necessary to do a separate search for each one, and then you're creating a separate CSV file for each one as well. So as a result, you'll end up with something that looks a bit like this, several different CSV files, all containing your data, but all of which need to be combined so you can then deduplicate, because obviously, because we've got different things in here, picking up the library note and that kind of thing, there's likely to be duplicates. So once I'd combined it all into one spreadsheet, I used various different methods of deduplication. DOI and web address fields were quite an obvious starting place, really. So for example, if you look at the DOI field here, you'll notice there are blanks. And this is where we need to be a bit careful again, because if you just highlighted all of the data and said deduplicate, it would lose all but one of the items, all but one of the rows that have a blank DOI. So if we're comparing DOIs, we want to sort it into order first. And that's the easiest way to avoid it. At a glance, you can see the duplicates, but given that Excel's let us down once already, let's make Excel do some work now. So first of all, I highlighted all of the data. So being careful, again, just to underline, just be careful not to include any that do not have a DOI, because they will not be duplicates, or very unlikely they'll be duplicates of each other. So just include the lines that have DOIs in them. And then there's a remove duplicates function within Excel, which is under the data toolbar. So when you use that function, you get this pop-up on the screen. By default, all the fields will be selected. So if you click unselect all, and then just select the DOI column and click OK. And then you get this lovely pop-up that tells you that we successfully removed some of the duplicates based on the DOI field. So then you can repeat that same process for the web address fields. And from Talis, there are 3 different web address fields available. So it's repeating that same process 4 times for the different fields. And then the second method of deduplication I used was a very manual way of doing it. It was just a visual deduplication by title, well, by sorting by title. So this is good as a final pass, but obviously we want to do as much as we can using functions within Excel and that kind of thing. On this screenshot here, I've hidden some fields so we can see more clearly the ones that we might be interested in. And then, as I mentioned, I sort by title. And then if you scan down it visually, you can spot some duplicates straight away, hopefully. When you find a candidate, you just need to check the other fields, author, edition, volume, published date, different things like that. ISBN is probably a good one. And all of the ones I've highlighted here were identified as duplicates. And then here's an example where actually you do need to be a bit careful because as you can see, the title has vol1 and vol2 on the end. It may not have that, but also the volume column does specify 1 and 2 as well. So you just need to be a little bit careful because that's obviously one we don't want to deduplicate. And then you basically, that's pretty much it. You then have your raw data ready for kind of further processing. And that's everything from me.
Lovely, thanks, Roland. Quick question for you. Can you remember how many titles did we end up finding through that?
I was thinking as I trying to stop sharing my screen. Hold on. Yeah, I was thinking as you were saying 30 earlier. I'm sure it was more than that. Can I get back to you? I'll have a little check now.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Right, thanks, Roland. So I'm thinking before we open this up for questions, I think it would be really helpful then, because half the people here would also be using Leganto, that we hear from Maria and Laura from, I want to say University of Leeds, that's right, isn't it? University of Leeds. So Maria Andredes de los Rios is the Open Books Coordinator at the University of Leeds, and her colleague Laura de Silva is the Acquisitions and Reading List Manager. They're going to show us how they use Leganto, and I think you've got a live demo this time. So I'll hand over to you, Maria.
Lovely, thank you so much. And thank you, Roland, as well, for walking us through how you approach this. So yeah, I'll go through what we did at Leeds, what worked well, and yeah, as well, what we learned. So yeah, our aim was also to find a repeatable way to identify open educational resources and reading lists using data that we already had in our systems, and also to understand how much manual checking will still be needed. So we ended up with 2 methods primarily. We've included both in the guidance that we shared in the JISC mailing list. So the first one looks at URLs in citations, the same as Brunel's approach, to identify OERs based on text strings. And the second one uses metadata records in our systems. So this metadata one required the least manual intervention and gave us the most reliable results. But this is because a great amount of metadata work has been done in the background. But the URL method was still useful because academics also add resources that sit outside our collections and our catalog, and those won't be picked up by the collections report. So yeah, starting with the URL-based report, that's where we began. We built a report that looked at the URL in citations and reading lists, and initially we only searched for the keywords open and textbooks, but we had a discussion with Roland and David, and we expanded that list to include other keywords that they were browsing as well. So that gave us an initial list of 116 citations. At that point, 2 of our colleagues went through that list manually, one by one, and marked the citations that were generally open and educational resources. So that review work was really valuable because it helped us identify exclusion terms. So cases where the URL matched our keywords, but the content wasn't an OER. That way we were able to refine the report to reduce the false positives. And we also found a couple of inconsistencies. So we found some cases where the reading list owner or the person who created that citation had added the item manually and assigned the wrong material type. So for example, something marked as a book, but it was in fact a journal article or a working paper. And we also found a couple of cases where a chapter was open, but the full book wasn't. So yeah, something to take in mind to be able to distinguish if you are counting on reporting OERs. That review work took a little over a week, but it did take priority over other tasks that they were doing at that time. And we also asked our colleagues who did the review to do one extra step, which was for reading lists that met certain criteria, which was having less than a certain number of citations and that had at least 2 OERs in them, which they could check on the report. We asked them to scan the whole list to see if there were any extra OERs that hadn't come up in the report. So from that extra step, they found 9 additional citations that qualified as OERs. Most of them appeared later on in our collections report, but we did gain an extra 2 or 3 citations through that step. One thing that's worth mentioning, and something that we all realized after doing all this review work, is that when adding the keywords in the analytics report, they need to be added separately. So it's one filter per keyword, which I'll show you in a second. Instead of adding a string of keywords into one filter. So that's interesting, Roland, that you said that that's not an option in Talis. It is in Exlibris Analytics, but it doesn't really work, or at least not for us. So yeah, that's a key step because only the first keyword was being picked up by their report, but not the rest of them. So we'll add a line to the guidance to reflect that. But when we did it that way, the report returned around 160 citations compared to the 116 citations that we were getting before. So yeah, I think important to flag here as well, because it does make a difference to the results that you get. I'll share my screen now to show you what the report looks like. So yeah, hope you can see that. So those are the criteria that we use, and that this is what I was talking about adding all the keywords separately instead of in one string. The reading list code field has been removed from the criteria just for confidential reasons as we're recording the session, but all the steps and all the criteria are in the guidance that we shared in the GISC mailing list, and an updated version of that guidance will be shared in the OER Community of Practice website as well shortly. So we have, so the reading list status, this will be depending on the statuses that you use at your institution to only search in active lists. These are the keywords where we're looking only at books and ebooks. And these are some of the exclusion terms that we so as a pattern in that review work to exclude from the results. And this is what it will look like. So yeah, then I'm sure you know, but yeah, you can download it on an Excel. We use the data version of this. I'll stop sharing. So yeah, then the second method that that we used and the one that we considered the most reliable was the collections report. So our metadata team set up featured collections in Alma and populates them using a mixture of community and institution zone MARC records, which are imported monthly. So using those collections, we can then set up a report that shows where those records appear in our reading lists. So this is our most reliable way of identifying OERs because the items that it picks up are generally OERs based on curated metadata rather than getting from or just looking at the URLs. So yeah, in the guidance, we've added some notes for anyone that wants to replicate this, but if anyone has any questions about that setup, you can share those questions via the GISC mailing list so that we can forward them to our metadata team, or you are very welcome as well to contact our metadata team directly. Their email address is in the guidance that we shared. So yeah, they'll be more than happy to help with that. I will also show you what that report looks like. Okay, there we go. So yeah, again, all the steps and all the criteria are in the guidance, and the read list code has been removed from this specific one. The open collections will look different depending on the collections that you have at your own institution. But the other filters are the same, just looking at active lists, the material type, the ones that you're looking at specifically. And again, yeah, this is what you will get. That order by book. Yeah, okay. And then yeah, so something worth mentioning when we were having the discussions with the metadata team, they let us know that there is another possible way to get a similar kind of report to this one, which is using the open access filter in analytics. Again, this relies on the open access filter being consistently recorded in the metadata and displayed in Prima as such. So the results that you get will depend on how consistently that filter is applied to your records. But again, our metadata team are the right people to talk to if you're exploring that route, and they'll be happy to answer any questions you have. I will share my screen for the last time to show you what it looks like in analytics. So it's this open access filter, and we just set it to yes. To get the results. So to compare the results from both reports, the open collections report had 873 citations. The open access filter report had 523 citations, and 75 citations that were in the open access filter report don't appear in the open collections report. These two reports can also be combined if you wanted to. We've separated them for clarity in the guidance. But yeah, they could very much be put together. And I think I've gone through everything that we wanted to share with you today. So yeah, that hopefully gives you a clearer picture of what we did and what worked and where the kind of the limits are. But yeah, we're very happy to take questions either now or yeah afterwards via the JISC mailing list or directly to the metadata team, depending on how technical the questions are. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thanks, Maria. So as Maria was saying there, we have now got about half an hour for questions. It's I don't know about you. I would imagine that many of you will be thinking, right, well, I'll go and give that a go, and then questions will come up. So I'm not necessarily expecting we'll fill the half hour with questions, but does anyone have any straight off the bat? Oh, Roland.
Without wanting to dominate, cool. I've got a question for Maria on you had the open access filter there. Is that picking up like a pre-programmed tag or a tag you've created or something like that? Or have I misunderstood and it's not a tag at all?
It is a tag that is applied to records that are OERs. I'm not too sure whether that's, I think that's done by our metadata team. Are you able to confirm this, Laura?
So I think Ex Libris, and so hopefully you'll have seen that there's Ex Libris are rolling out a little bit more. They've understood that we want to know OERs on reading list, and so in their roadmap there is they're going to be able to identify. They say they're going to be able to identify open access materials and tag it that way. There is something similar working currently in Primo. Primo, the discovery layer in Ex Libris products, identifies open access, and so I'm not sure. Again, that's our metadata team that will know best how that works. But so I think it's using that tag. So yeah, so we also have created a tag for open access that we're applying to reading lists as we're going down. So that could be, but that's a work in progress. So not, I think, what's been used in this case.
Interesting, just comparing it to Talis. Because in Talis, it's just a free text field, which is obviously open to mistakes happening and typos and things like that. So, yeah, I might. I don't know if Talis are looking at adding filters, adding tags rather, but that would be something for me to take back and ask them about. So, thank you.
Lovely. Maria and Laura, Chris in the chat has asked whether that was in the 506 field. You may know that off by heart.
So our 506 field, and excuse my lack of knowledge about metadata in this one, is that we use for the access. And so, that's something that we put in manually as we're ordering records. So it's unlikely. So I imagine if the 506 field is used for access, and so that's so we would say in our 506 that eBook Central or whichever the provider is allows however many users to access at a time. So it might be that in other institutions it's used for it's an open access thing, and I don't think our 506 is used. I think weirdly we use a couple of others. So the 997 will be often used to identify the collection. So that might be where we've got an open collection. That will be where that's found. But because okay, so at Sussex we use the 506 if we add an open access ebook as an institutional record. That's really interesting. So thank you. I imagine absolutely, Joshua, you could be using the 506 to identify that. That would be a really good place to start a search.
And I'm imagining, Joshua, that's the comment you were about to make when you had your hand up. So thank you very much. That's really helpful. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Shall we talk about next steps? So I think probably the best thing to do after the end of this session, I will email everybody here who registered to attend with Maria, Roland, and Laura's email address once again. They will also be just updating their guidance to make sure that it reflects everything that they were planning to discuss today. We will then add that to the OER Community of Practice website. I was wondering as well that there may well be questions that you have as you take this away and you go and work on this with your own reading lists. if there are questions that you feel comfortable adding to the JISC mail list, I think that would be really helpful. I think it first of all shows people that this may be a common question, and or somebody may well be able to answer it for you. But it just it shows also, one of the other things I would be really grateful for is if you are subscribed on that JISC mail list and you have done this work, just letting people know that you've put it on the OER website would be really helpful as well. And this will be kind of like our first wave of doing this. And as we have more and more institutions adding details and letting people know that this work is going on, hopefully that will snowball and we'll end up with a really quite large collection that we can add to the Open Textbook Library. So the guidance on the OER website, I would expect will be, because it's me that's doing it, so I would imagine that will be by the end of the week. I think that's a reasonable time period for that. But in the meantime, Deb, you have your hand up.
Hi, David. Thanks. Sorry, I've got technical problems, so I can't put my camera on. Do we need to have, or should there be some sort of consistency about which platforms we're searching for, or does that not matter? Because at Sheffield, we've gone for DOAB, LibreText, OAPEN, Open Textbook Library, and Open Book Publishers. But I can see that Brunel and Leeds have got most of those and some other platforms as well. I'm just wondering if it's worth a conversation at all, maybe on the mailing list, or whether anyone has particularly strong feelings about which platforms ought to be included.
So I think a conversation about where people are looking would be really helpful. There may well be resources that we are missing, but also if there are some where there are issues with the resource that you're discovering through that repository, that would be really interesting to hear. We don't have to have a set standard, because it may, even if you are setting or sending an incomplete list of the OERs in your reading lists, that's still going to be helpful to everybody. I'm imagining there's going to be a lot of duplication as well, but that's something that we can work out at our end. So what you can send us, I think it's minimizing the amount of work that you have to do. That's the most important thing. So if you have a standard practice, use that. If you want to be more expansive, then use that too. That's either way will be absolutely fine.
Great, thank you very much.
Right. Okay, last chance for any questions. Oh, Roland, the floor's yours.
I suppose a question off the back of that is, and there might not be an answer to this, is would you rather people send books that may not be open, or may not, maybe candidates that might slip through the net, or would you rather people under deliver or over deliver? I guess is the question there. Or does it matter?
I think over delivering would be absolutely fine. As I say, I'm expecting there will be some duplicates, but that's easy. We can, once we have the whole spreadsheet, we can deduplicate. If it is material that we believe doesn't meet the Open Textbook Library criteria, that's really easy to weed out. You just have to have a look at it. And even if it misses our first pass, then the staff at the Open Education Network, they can, on their second pass, they can capture it as well. I would much rather, for me, that I think where this started as well. So Jo, who's on the call and monitoring the chat, she does the train the trainer sessions, and she's led workshops with academics. And when we started doing this at Brunel, the big issue was that we want to take them to the Open Textbook Library, and people are really enthusiastic, but then they can't find the textbooks for their subject area. So I would much rather make the Open Textbook Library as large as possible while still maintaining quality. That's the most important thing. So we have those engaged academics have something to review. Good question. Thanks, Roland. Right. Okay. I think that's everything. So thank you to everyone for your time. Thank you, Maria and Laura, especially for taking the time to do that at Leeds and to share that with everybody. Thank you, Roland, because I think this has been really helpful to me to know how much material we already use that is OER, but also now we can begin to monitor the impact of all the work that everybody is doing. We can see year on year the growth in open textbooks in our institutions and demonstrate the impact of the work that all of us are doing. one last reminder that the workshop I'll be leading with Dal is scheduled for the 26th of February. So if you can do the work early, that would be really helpful to us. And we'll put the guidance up on the website by the end of the week. And I'll also share with everybody here. So Laura, Maria and Roland's contact details if you have any questions. And hopefully we'll see a lot of activity on the JISCmail list as well as people submit their reading list and let people know of the work that they've done. That would be great. Right. Thank you. And now, Roland, was that the last hand?
Yeah, can I just mention, because I realised I put it in the chat and it won't be on the recording, but just to confirm, we found 150 books and 30 chapters. So yeah, it was more than the 30. I think you must have seen the chapters list and not seen the book list at that point, David. So okay. Yeah, just thought I'd confirm that for the recording. So yeah,
lovely. Thanks, Roland. And on that bombshell, okay. Right. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. See you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.